I am Daniel Lucas, and welcome to Book 101 Review. Book 101 is all about the books that I read for the last 40 years. And today, I have my feature author of the month of November. He's award-winning author, of course, no other than Mr. Gerald Everett Jones.
Thank you, Daniel.
Welcome to Book 101, Mr. Gerald. And can you please introduce yourself?
Well, I'm Gerald Everett Jones, and I've been writing ever since I was, I won my first book award in fourth grade for a short story called it was an essay called Why Most People Like Tom Sawyer. And most of my working life, I've been a professional writer, but also I got very involved with computer graphics back in the day. So I did a lot of technical and how-to books in the early days of PCs, and then later, involved with graphics and digital filmmaking.
Mr. Gerald, thank you for sharing your talents to the world. What inspired you to become an author?
Well, I had one of my very early jobs out of college. Well, for a while I was going to be an actor, and then I found out that I had to wait for people to cast me. That didn't work out too well. And I did some professional acting for a while, but one of my early jobs, I was doing actually corporate training. I was doing certification examinations for CPAs, which is about as dull as you can get. But the fellow that I was working for was also a consultant. He was an expert in corporate training. And after he left the job, after he finished his assignment, I got a peek at the evaluation that he'd given for my performance. And he said, this guy, like me, is obsessed with writing. If he couldn't write anything, he'd write on the back of matchbooks. And that just was kind of a marvelous thing to say because, in some ways, and they say this about actors as well, if you could do something else and make money, you probably would be doing it.
That's for sure. So can you tell us your writing process?
Well, back when, I've actually for a number of interviews, I've given some thought to this. So this is why my thoughts might sound cogent. But back in the day when I began writing as a professional, writing business and technical books, I had an agent, and a rather prominent nonfiction book agent. And I had various book contracts with mainstream publishers, Cybex and Peach Pit and Wiley. And in that process, you submit an outline, detailed outline for your book, and you're assigned an editor. And then you're given a certain amount of time to write, turn in 2 chapters a week. Here's your deadline. And you're supervised by this fellow who would slap my hands if I departed from the outline. So I became very disciplined at what the editor called getting my butt in a chair every morning. And also I learned to write to an outline and to structure. And I learned a lot about grammar and style and voice and grade level and all those good things. Well, it was about 20 years ago that I informed my book agent that I wanted to concentrate on fiction. And his answer was, well, have a nice life.
Indeed, so you have a nice life.
I was a very early adopter of print-on-demand digital, which actually was before ebooks, but then ebooks. And I became very involved in indie publishing and small presses, and I have my own small press imprint. And I've now published 14 novels under my imprint, and I've won more than 20 some awards for those novels. But I will say the thing that I think is most interesting, perhaps to your listeners about that, is that I don't write to outlines anymore, especially when I write mysteries, because I want to surprise myself. Because if I can surprise myself, perhaps I can surprise and delight you. And there have been, I've written now 4 mysteries in the Preacher Evan Wycliffe series. And at least 3 of those 4, my beta readers, I have a close cadre of beta readers, my beta readers all say, I didn't know how it was going to turn out to the last page. And my answer was, I didn't either.
Still, they are surprised.
Well,
So how
that's
do
the
you?
thing. And
Yes.
you know, when I read mystery, well, really, I mean, I want a page turner. And I think the best advice one of the best pieces of advice I ever got was from Dan Brown. And not in person, I watched his masterclass.
Yes.
And his advice was make promises to the reader. And I wondered,
Yes.
what does that mean? And he said, really, what you want to do is you want to create situations where the reader wonders what happens next. And the promise
Sure.
is if you turn the page, you'll find out. So particularly the so-called cliffhanger at the end of a chapter, never end a chapter by answering the question or a question.
Definitely.
You want to understand, especially as you're going through your revised draft, what is the reader wondering at this point? What do they most want to know? And then deliberately withhold that.
So, Mr. Gerald, how do you develop your characters and plot lines?
I'll go back to what I said about being an actor. Now,
Yes.
through high school, my father, who was a scientist, wanted me to become a scientist, and I was very serious about that up through junior high school and early days of high school. And I did also take quite a lot of science when I was in high school, but I started turning into writing because I just really wanted self-expression, whatever. But when I was in college, my girlfriend said, you know, you're always doing these accents and you're always kind of showing off. Don't you want to be an actor? And so after that, I actually applied for a position in a summer stock company, and I performed in summer stock, and I minored in theater, and I did quite a bit of acting in college. I went to a all-male school, so I got loaned out to the women's schools to play the male parts. So I did that a few times. But then when I got out of college, as I say, it was a bit challenging. I had a challenge with my health, and I didn't think that I could wait tables or drive a cab in New York City and maintain my health. So I went into writing at that point, and that's when I got involved in corporate and educational and then also instructional writing. So I had a lot of training in expository writing. But as far as the acting is concerned and the characters, and that was your question, how to evolve the characters. When you're writing fiction, one of the marvelous things, especially about having some training in the theater and in acting, is as an actor, you begin to realize early on that it's not a matter of imitating some character that is required in the script. It's a matter of finding that character in your own personality, in your own traits, in your own, putting your own stamp on it. But also, I mean, if you're a bad guy, you got to find out in what ways you might be capable of being a bad guy. So you do rapidly find out as an actor, anybody's capable of anything. And it's kind of scary to have those thoughts. But I mean, the actor that I would give as a really good example is Joaquin Phoenix, you know, the
Yes.
Joker. You know, you couldn't find anybody more of a lunatic, more vicious, more quote unquote evil than that character. And yet Joaquin Phoenix is a vegan. He's an animal activist. He is not in real life. He is not anything like that. I've not run across him. I've not met him. One of these days at a Hollywood cocktail party, maybe I will. But I will just simply say that he has found in himself. He's also playing vicious Roman emperor in the Gladiator. I mean, we're just incredibly vicious roles, and so you find in yourself that. And so the bottom line here, and the point that I've been trying to get to, and I've wasted a lot of words to get there, is you put your characters on stage, and then you let them go where they want to go.
Yes. Surprise them. So what challenges have you faced in your writing career?
Well, often it's difficult to pay the bills. And I do developmental editing.
Yes.
I'm listed on readsy.com. Right now I'm coaching 3 other authors on their books. One is a business memoir. Another one is a self-help development memoir. And another is I suppose you'd also call it a memoir, but it's a book about animal communication, about a woman who is so in touch with her animal companions. So that's really stimulating to be able to help people deliver on their self-expression and their aspirations, because you have to remember, as an editor, you're not trying to force your voice on them or your writing style on them, or you don't lower the Chicago manuals of style on them like some kind of burden. You try to keep their voice into the manuscript, even when it might not be strictly grammatical, even when they might be writing in fragments. But I mean, very often what I will do is I will say, listen, and I find that especially beginning authors, even though they write rather well, something that they do very often is they'll often put the topic sentence as the last sentence of the paragraph. They feel as though it's kind of a payoff. Like, oh, well, what that means is here. Okay. And all I do is encourage them to make that the first sentence of the paragraph, is tell the reader why they're going to read this paragraph. Why should I listen to all the detail you're going to give me about why you got there? Tell me where you got, because that will raise a question in my mind of, why did you choose to go there? See, we're right back to Dan Brown, the promises. Make that promise of digest that topic sentence. I was an unwanted child. Okay. That's your topic sentence. It's like, really? Well, either aren't we all, or how odd, or how tragic, or, tell me why. And that's what the paragraph does, you see. So that's part of it. And, I'm not necessarily, I will sometimes do some, I wouldn't call it necessarily ghostwriting, but I'll do some fill in the blanks where
Yes.
I'll go, this really needs a transition. You've got a logic gap here. I don't understand how you got from this episode to this episode. I don't understand where, you talked about college, but then you talked about your promotion from your first job. I didn't understand your struggles getting there. Now, maybe I don't need all that information about how difficult it was to be a novice, whatever it was. But I probably need a couple sentences about, my first job was this, I got fired from that. My second job was this, I got fired from that. And the lesson learned was, I don't really think I should do that for a living. Okay, so that's 3 sentences. But that got me from here to there. And I'm not scratching my head about, well, how come he's getting, well, the reason he's getting promoted is he's finally doing what he really was meant to do. Okay. Which, so if that's a memoir, then that's really important, because what we often have to say, we want to say to memoir writers is, you don't begin on September 6th, I was born. You do, as one Hollywood director advised me. He said, it's like you're going to a party. Arrive late and leave early. So I want to, that first sentence, and I found a lot of best-selling authors don't do it this way, and sometimes it irritates me when they don't. That first sentence should be jumping in the middle of the action. And think about it. If you're walking in the door to a cocktail party and you don't know anybody,
Yes.
you're hearing fragments of conversation. It's like, are you still beating your wife? And we want to go to Italy. I mean, you're hearing all these fragments, and so as the newcomer, you have to kind of piece them together. You're getting these pieces of the puzzle. And yes, back in the old days when it was Balzac and Dickens and whatever, they would give you 5 pages on who was attending the party and what station they had in life and what they were wearing. Well, we read books the way we watch movies now. Okay. And even movies will often start too early. They'll give you a lot of what my old editor called throat clearing. Well, and I mean, no, I don't want to sit through that. Put me in the middle of the party and I'll figure it out.
Yes.
That's very interesting because you are what John le Carre would call a close observer. Now, what is, le Carre wrote spy books, spy novels. What is a spy but a close observer? He watches everything. If he walks in, let's say he breaks into some bad guy's apartment. Okay, he's looking at his desk. We're going to get a description of everything that's on the desk. This pile of papers, that pencil holder, this smudge here. Okay, here's a pad. Old detective story technique. Here's a pad, and it looks like a blank page, but wait, somebody pressed down when they were writing the thing on top of here. Oh wait, let me take a pencil. Okay. Here's what they wrote. I'm going to go out and kill Bob. Okay. So here are all these details that you're being given. And you don't know which are going to be important. And in the old days, the editor would say, well, you've lost the reader. They don't know where they are. No. Today, people know how to pay attention in that way. They want to piece it together. They want to have the adventure of not having you explain it to them. They would like to have it unfold, and they would like to, because that way they'll pay attention. Because if you're telling them what to think, then, they might just give you 10 pages and put the book down, return it to the library, whatever. So that's the challenge is you want to engage the way you would want to be engaged as a reader. And that's why it's easy to catch yourself when you might be talking down, because in proofreading it, you're going to be bored. Like, oh, I'll just skim the next 2 paragraphs because I know how I know those. Well, maybe that's the stuff you should cut.
So how do you handle writer's block, Mr. Gerald?
I don't find writer's block per se because, again, the advice of that old editor was put your butt in a chair every morning. So you've got to write something before you get up. I will say that there are times when it really, it's the old Robert Frost, 2 roads divergent in a yellow wood. It's really hard to know which path to take. And, conventional wisdom is, and writing coaches will say, take one of the paths and see where it turns out. And a very good example of that, if you go back to reading the book, not necessarily the movie, The French Lieutenant's Woman, John Fowles. You'll get halfway through the book, and it's, that's the way the plot would have worked if the carriage had turned to east. But this time, actually, the carriage turned west. So John Fowles rewrites his entire book. Like, sorry. And, ordinarily with a writer that would have been in a trash can, but Fowle said, no, I'll keep it in the book. So that's one approach. I have known writers, and not necessarily myself. I have known writers that will sit down to their blank page and they will give the two characters who are going to be in the next scene, they will imagine them sitting at a restaurant facing each other, and they're going to have a disagreement. And one way to do that, and it was a writing exercise that I did once, one way to do that is one of them has a secret and won't tell the other one. So no matter what the other one says, no matter what they ask, they're not telling the secret. So you're going to get a dialogue out of that. Now, that might not be something that you keep in the book, but it was Robert McKee, the screenwriting instructor, who said, if you have a scene that seems like a lot of explanation, that's boring. And he said, what you want to do is you want the two characters, and usually it would be the main character and somebody that they call the opponent ally. So this is, in other words, the sidekick. The guy who's there for him to talk to, or the guy who's there to challenge him on how they want to go. And McKee's advice was, start with a disagreement about action and end the scene with a disagreement about values. And the example I give is, the disagreement about action is, say, dear, where do you want to go to dinner? Anybody who's been in a relationship can tell you how that might devolve into an argument. And the disagreement about values at the end of that argument is, I knew you never loved me. And like I said, if you've been in a relationship, you know how to get from here to there. I don't have to tell you. Okay, but dramatically, that's interesting. There's all kinds of variations on that. So that's one way to do it. My suggestion, and what I do often, is I literally sleep on it. I ask myself a question, late in the day when I've exhausted, and say, I'll think about this tomorrow. And, when I wake up, it's amazing. Either when I wake up or perhaps if I finish a morning meditation, the thought, I haven't been thinking about the book during my meditation. I've been trying to just kind of calm my mind. But so I think the role of the subconscious is really, really, really important. And I don't know how it writes. I don't know, are you Mozart taking dictation from God? I just don't know. But I will say that very many of my breakthrough plot ideas, if you will, that where I thought I was stuck and I come unstuck, they came out of nowhere. And another suggestion I will give you, a very practical suggestion, is either step in the shower or use a white noise generator. Because when you're in the shower, the sound of the water is white noise. It includes all of the frequencies in the audio spectrum. There's something about white noise that triggers stuff in your mind that you didn't know you were even thinking of, or will trigger memories from your past, or suddenly you're going to, and I find this even when sometimes I just get bored and I play online solitaire. I could be in the middle of a solitaire game and suddenly I'll think of something, and it has to do with I'm kind of distracting my left brain with something and giving it something to feed on so that it's not interfering with my subconscious and my right brain. Because there was also it was actually a psychotherapist who felt that storytelling does help reveal the subconscious in strange ways, because what happens is, after you've forgotten the story, after you think you've forgotten the story, because his theory was nobody ever forgets anything. But he said, after you've forgotten, your conscious mind gets out of the way and lets your subconscious mind speak to you. And it is, I think, generally true. And again, amateur psychology. It is generally true, I think, that the left brain, the literate brain, the verbal brain, the grammar punctuation brain, is the censoring brain. Well, don't think about that right now. Or that's too complicated,
Yes.
or that's against my religion, or that belongs to the other political party, or there it's this traffic cop saying, this stuff that you want to think about over here, don't think about it right now. So what that can do is create a block, and you're talking about that white page, and it's like part of this wants to say something. And that's the part I really want to hear, because maybe that's not something that I ever read before. And that's why it's just so wrong for writers to write to trends and to genres and to editors' expectations, because what you're writing today, the likelihood is people are going to read it, the first time they're going to read it maybe 2 years from now. You can't anticipate what people are going to want then. All you can do is listen to what you want. Listen to what your heart is yearning for that maybe it doesn't even have words for yet. And imagine that you're like other people and they don't know what they want yet either. But guess what? You're going to tell
them. You're going to tell them.
And they go, yes. Well, and that's the other thing is, Hollywood, give me a new idea that stood the test of time. I think that was the very first writing instruction I ever got. I think it's a Sam Goldwyn-ism, is, they want something everybody's seen before, but they think it's new. Tried and true, but, new spin. Give us a new spin. And I do think that, of course, not much has changed from Aristotle, three-act structure, conflict is drama, all those good things. So yes, those things still apply. But I think that even looking on your own series, like I have the Preacher Evan Wycliffe books, even thinking about, this is what he did before, or these are the people he encountered before, or these are the problems he faced before. What did people like about this before? I think that the next book, if that ends up getting finished, the next one in the series, I think I want him to go someplace nobody expected he would go. And I've gotten up to the point where he's been threatened, but I don't really know. I think I've got him painted into a corner. I don't really know the way out yet. And it also has to do with some of the things that are going on in society, and some of the disagreements that are being had, and some of the breakdowns in communication that exist. I mean, all these cultural things that, we have an election tomorrow. Okay. I mean, all these things that are coming out and causing such anxiety. Well, I have a feeling the exact anxiety is not going to stop tomorrow, no matter what happens. So these are things we've been living with for quite a long time. And I suspect that some of it has to do with human nature. Some of it has to do with the way society is evolving, especially with the evolution of technology. It's just crazy. But I think also one of the things that I see is that people will ask me, well, why all over the world there's this, these strong leaders that look like dictators and authoritarian governments, and what's going on? And my explanation is, I don't think it's very complicated. When I grew up in the 1950s and 60s, there was just basically one way for the world to end. It was called a nuclear bomb. Okay. Now, ways for the world to end? Pick
Lots.
one. There's at least 30 of them. Okay.
Well, sure,
Water
yes.
shortage, drought, pestilence,
Yes.
uncontrolled pandemic. I mean, and so we live in insecurity day to day, not only and some of those insecurities already existed back then. We just weren't aware of them because we didn't have social media bombarding us with that information every 5 minutes. And I think people are anxious today, very anxious and concerned, because what will the world be like for my children? What will the world be like for me tomorrow? Will I be able to pay the bills tomorrow? And it's like, okay, what's the answer to that? Just make that bad man go away. So it's like, people in the past who've said, and my dad actually confided with me, and I had trouble believing this, but my father's mother was second generation German. And my dad served in World War II. And Dad said, Grandma, she was a fan of Hitler until she found out about the camps. That wasn't until 1944. The war had been going in the United States for over 3 years before the Allies came in and found those bodies and those camps. I mean, there were rumors, but there weren't pictures. And certainly there weren't newsreel. I mean, here we see the results of the most atrocious things on a daily basis. It just happened 10 seconds ago, and it's on the internet. So is there any wonder that people are worried, anxious, and, just make it stop? But the problem is those guys who promise to make it stop, careful what you ask for.
So, Mr. Gerald, what advice do you have for aspiring writers out there?
Get your chair in your butt. Get your butt in the chair every day. I think that's really good advice. It's funny because one piece of advice that I have heard over the years, and it's something of a stereotype that writers and actors have trouble staying married. But one of the things that, if you are going to commit to a long-term relationship, one of the pieces of advice I heard was, if you want to stay married, just convince your spouse that when you're staring out the window, you're doing your hardest work.
Wow.
And,
I agree.
it seriously, if you're a writer or you are an actor memorizing your lines, or, if you're a sculptor, doing your preliminary sketches or whatever it happens to be, you're lost in thought. And you can't be in those professions, I don't think, if you don't like your own company better than anybody else's. And that may sound very selfish, but you have to be willing to kind of stare at that screen or look at that page or gaze out that window for an extended period of time. You need to have an attention span and be thinking about things that maybe nobody else quite thought through. And I'd say the same would be true if you're a mathematician in quantum physics. You're not going to solve this in 2 minutes. So, you're going to have some space. And so if you are that kind of person, which tends to be kind of introverted, something self-absorbed, if you will, perhaps even considered a little arrogant, snobbish, it's possible. It's not unlikely that your spouse is going to say, "You never talk to me. We never have any fun." And it's like, guilty as charged, but that's who I am.
Very well said. Very well said, Mr. Gerald. So, to sum up our discussion, what is your short-term and long-term goals in writing?
Well, I do have a Substack blog, Gerald Everett Jones, Substack.com, and it's called Thinking About Thinking. And my short-term goals are I usually try to do at least a couple of posts a week. I've got about 7,000 fans there and very good engagement. And I typically will review books that are not not by me, but they're by authors that I admire. And there's a very selfish reasons for that. It's called brand promotion. And that is, if you like Paul Auster, you might like Gerald Everett Jones. Okay,
Definitely.
Margaret Atwood, John le Carre, and Tyler. So yes, and we may even talk about some of those books as the month goes on, some that have been my favorites and that have influenced me in my writing. So yes, the Substack blog, that's short term, and then yes, I'm coaching those other authors, but I am working on the 5th episode of the Preacher Evan Wycliffe series, and that will be, I think, set in at least beginning in Nashville, and that will be Preacher Faces the Music.
Wow. Congratulations again, Mr. Gerald. And can you please invite our listeners to support all your projects, your books?
GeraldEverettJones.com. You will find maybe even more information than you want to know about me. The latest in the Preacher Evan Wycliffe series is Preacher Stalls the Second Coming. And I'm not going to explain that.
Award-winning author, Mr. Gerald Everett Jones. Thank you so much for your time.
Daniel, you're so generous with your time, and you're such a kind host. Thank you.
More to come, people. See you soon.